They say money cannot buy happiness, but it can certainly purchase the total destruction of the man who betrayed you. My husband, Arthur, believes I am just a poor orphan he rescued 5 years ago, unaware his empire was funded by my estranged mother, tonight, as he proudly toasts his mistress. I simply step onto the balcony and make one call. Mom, pull the plug. Arthur is about to learn that true hell is just a bank account hitting zero. My name is Lydia Fairmont, though for the last 5 years, the world has known me simply as Lydia Sterling, the invisible wife of the architectural visionary Arthur Sterling, standing here tonight in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, beneath chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears. I felt less like a spouse and more like a smudge of dirt on a pristine marble floor. This was the 5th anniversary gala of Sterling Horizons, the company my husband built from the ground up, or so the narrative went. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, old money, and the metallic tang of ambition. It was suffocating. I adjusted the hem of my navy blue dress, a modest piece I had purchased off the rack 3 years ago. At the time, $30 had felt like a significant investment, a necessary expense to look presentable for Arthur's first major client dinner. Tonight, surrounded by women in Givenchy and custom Vera Wang, I looked like the hired help who had wandered into the wrong room. I saw the way the waitstaff looked at me, their eyes sliding over my figure with a mixture of confusion and pity, before moving on to serve champagne to guests who actually looked like they belonged. "Excuse me, miss," a waiter murmured, stepping around me as if I were a piece of furniture placed inconveniently in the aisle. He did not offer me a glass. I retreated toward a pillar, trying to make myself as small as possible. The irony was bitter. I was the legal wife of the host, yet I was the only person here who felt like a trespasser. I scanned the crowd for Arthur, my heart doing that familiar, pathetic flutter. It always did when I thought of him. I had not seen him all day. He had told me to arrive separately, claiming he had last-minute press interviews and did not want to worry about my transportation. I had taken the subway. Then the orchestra swelled, a dramatic crescendo that silenced the room. The double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, his voice echoing off the gold-leafed ceiling. "The man of the hour, CEO of Sterling Horizons, Mr. Arthur Sterling." Arthur stepped out, and he was breathtaking. He wore a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, the satin lapels catching the light. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. But he was not alone. Linked tightly to his arm was Bella Sinclair. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of whispers that felt physically cold against my skin. Bella was the new creative director Arthur had hired 6 months ago. She was 24, radiant, and dangerous. She wore a backless crimson gown that clung to her curves like a second skin. A dress that likely cost more than the entire college tuition fund I had tried to start for our hypothetical children. She threw her head back and laughed at something Arthur whispered, her diamonds flashing aggressively under the lights. They descended the stairs together. A perfect power couple. Arthur did not look for me. His eyes were locked on the photographers flashing their bulbs at the bottom of the steps. He guided Bella with a possessive hand on the small of her back, a gesture he used to reserve for me in the first year of our marriage, back when we were eating instant noodles in a studio apartment in Queens. I felt a nausea rise in my throat, hot and acidic. I wanted to look away, but I was paralyzed. They moved through the crowd like sharks through water, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. I watched as Arthur introduced Bella to the city council members, to the real estate tycoons, to the people who mattered, eventually. They reached the stage. Arthur took the microphone, his charismatic smile beaming out to the room. 5 years, Arthur began, his voice smooth and commanding. 5 years ago, I had nothing but a sketchpad and a dream. Today, Sterling Horizons is reshaping the skyline of New York City. Applause thundered. I clapped too, my hands trembling. None of this would be possible without inspiration, Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a tender register. He turned his gaze, not to the dark corner where I stood, but to the woman in red standing beside him. They say behind every great man is a great woman. Tonight, I want to honor my muse, the woman whose vision and passion have breathed new life into this firm. Bella, my creative director, my partner in every sense of the word, you are the fire that keeps this engine running. He raised his glass. To Bella. To Bella. The crowd roared back. My hands fell to my sides. He had not just ignored me, he had erased me. 5 years of scrimping, of sewing buttons on his shirts, of proofreading his emails until 2 a.m, of skipping meals so he could afford drafting paper, all of it wiped away in a single toast to a woman he had known for half a year. I felt a sudden, desperate need to leave, to flee back to the safety of anonymity. I turned to head for the exit, but the crowd was too dense. I found myself pushed toward the buffet tables, trapped, and then she was there. Bella Sinclair materialized in front of me, a crystal flute of red wine in her manicured hand. Up close, her beauty was terrifyingly flawless, but her eyes were hard, devoid of any warmth. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in a sneer that was barely concealed. "Lydia, isn't it?" she asked, her voice loud enough to carry over the nearby conversations. "Arthur mentioned you were coming, I must say. That is a brave choice of attire. Vintage, or just goodwill?" A few women nearby covered their mouths to hide their giggles. My face burned. "It is nice to meet you, Bella," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "Arthur has spoken highly of your work." "I bet he has," she purred. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. "You know, he told me you used to be a librarian. It makes sense. You have that dusty, shelf-worn look about you. You really do not fit in this world, do you, sweetie?" Before I could respond, Bella feigned a stumble. Her hand jerked forward. The cold liquid splashed across my chest, soaking into the cheap fabric of my dress instantly. The dark red stain spread like a wound over my heart. "Oh my God!" Bella shrieked, her hand flying to her mouth in mock horror. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry. Lydia, I guess I just did not see you there. You blend into the background so well." The room went silent for a heartbeat, and then ripples of laughter broke out. It was not sympathetic laughter. It was the cruel, sharp laughter of the elite watching a peasant fall in the mud. I stood there, dripping, the wine chilling my skin, humiliation burning my eyes. A waiter rushed over, not to help me, but to hand Bella a napkin to wipe a single drop from her finger. "Enough!" Arthur's voice cut through the noise. He appeared at Bella's side, his face tight with annoyance, but he was not annoyed at her. He was looking at me with pure disdain. "You are making a scene," he hissed at me. "She spilled wine on me." "Arthur," I whispered, shivering. "Because you are clumsy and awkward," he snapped. He grabbed my upper arm, his grip bruising. "Come with me, now." He dragged me away from the crowd, through a service door and into a quiet, dimly lit corridor leading to the kitchens. The sudden silence was jarring. He released my arm with a shove that sent me stumbling against the wall. Arthur adjusted his cufflinks, refusing to look me in the eye. "I was going to wait until tomorrow, out of respect for the anniversary, but seeing you out there, looking like a drowned rat, embarrassing me in front of the investors, I cannot do this anymore." He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a folded white envelope. He tossed it at me. It landed on the floor between us. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Divorce papers," Arthur said coldly. "My lawyers drafted them this morning. You are not fit for the life I live now. Lydia, you were fine when I was a nobody. You were a comfortable, low-maintenance placeholder. But look at you. You are an anchor, dragging me down. Bella understands this world. She shines. You just exist." I looked down at the envelope, then back up at the man I had devoted 5 years of my life to. "Arthur, I supported you. I paid the rent when you had no clients. Stop," he interrupted, holding up a hand. Do not give me that martyr speech. I am the genius here. Lydia, I built this company. You just happen to be in the room, and do not think you are getting a payday out of this. I have moved everything. The accounts, the properties, the equity. It is all tied up in offshore trusts and shell companies you will never find. On paper, I am broke. You will leave this marriage exactly how you entered it, with nothing. He stepped closer. His cologne, a scent I had bought him for his birthday, filling my nose. Sign the papers. Pack your things. I want you out of the apartment tonight. Bella is moving in tomorrow morning. Tonight? I repeated, my voice hollow. Arthur, it is 11 o'clock at night. Where am I supposed to go? The library? He sneered. I do not care. Lydia, just disappear. If you try to fight this, if you try to drag my name through the mud with a lawsuit, I will bury you in legal fees until you are begging for change on the street. Do we understand each other? I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in 5 years, the fog of love lifted completely. I did not see the struggling artist I had fallen for. I saw a small, insecure man wearing an expensive suit, desperate to prove he was a giant. He expected me to cry. He expected me to fall to my knees, to grab the hem of his trousers and beg for mercy. He was waiting for the satisfaction of my desperation to feed his ego. Instead, a strange, icy calm settled over me. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. Steadying the tremors, I straightened my back. I brushed a lock of wet hair from my face. I understand perfectly. Arthur, I said. My voice was even, devoid of emotion. Arthur blinked, clearly taken aback. The lack of tears seemed to unsettle him more than screaming would have. He frowned, searching my face for a crack. Good, then get out. He turned on his heel and walked back toward the ballroom. Toward the music and the applause and the woman in the red dress, he did not look back. He thought he had just discarded a piece of trash. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the party. Then, I turned and walked in the opposite direction. I did not go to the exit. I found the service elevator and pressed the button for the roof. The night air on the balcony was biting, carrying the chill of the Atlantic. I walked to the stone railing and looked down. Manhattan sprawled out beneath me, a grid of electricity and ambition, millions of lights, each one representing a life, a dream, or a lie. From up here, the cars looked like toys. The people were invisible. The noise of the city was just a low hum. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. It was an old model. The screen cracked in the corner. Another sacrifice I had made so Arthur could have the latest technology. My fingers hovered over the keypad. For 5 years, I had run from my past. I had tried to prove that I could live a normal life, that I could find love that was not transactional, that I could be happy without the weight of my family name crushing me. I had wanted to be loved for myself, not for what I could provide. Arthur had proven that was a fantasy. He had shown me that in his world, the world he so desperately wanted to belong to, love was just another currency, and I had been devalued. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had cut off my resources. He had no idea that he had just severed the only leash holding back a monster. I dialed the number. I knew it by heart, though I had never saved it. It rang once, twice. Click. Lydia? The voice on the other end was sharp, commanding, and instantly recognizable. It was the voice that moved markets, the voice that made grown men on Wall Street tremble. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold city air. I looked down at the streets where Arthur believed I would soon be sleeping. Mother, I said, and the word felt like unlocking a weapon I had kept in a glass case. To what do I owe this pleasure? She asked. There was no warmth, only curiosity. Evelyn Fairmont did not do small talk. I am done playing house, I said, my voice steel. I agree to the terms. I will take the position. I will inherit the group. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and pregnant. Then, a low chuckle. I knew you would come back. You are a Fairmont, After all, what changed your mind? I looked back toward the door that led down to the ballroom, imagining Arthur raising another glass, imagining Bella laughing at my expense. Arthur Sterling, I said. Ah, Mother said. The architect. Did he bite the hand that fed him? He severed it, I replied. And now I want to watch him bleed. What do you need, Lydia? I gripped the cold stone railing, my knuckles turning white. I want everything he has. Mother, his reputation, his assets, his future. I want him to wake up tomorrow and realize that the ground beneath his feet was never his. I paused, letting the full weight of my decisions settle. Mom, I said, delivering the sentence that would end Arthur's life as he knew it. Pull the plug. But before you do, execute the leverage buyout on his debt. I want Sterling Horizons destroyed. Consider it done, Evelyn Fairmont said. Welcome home, daughter. I hung up the phone and stared out at the city. The wind whipped my wine-stained dress around my legs, but I no longer felt the cold. I felt only the burning heat of the fire that was about to consume Arthur Sterling's world. He wanted a divorce? He wanted to talk about class and suitability? I smiled, and it was a smile that would have terrified him if he had seen it. Let the games begin. The service elevator rattled as it descended, a stark contrast to the silent, velvet-lined lift that carried the guests of the gala. I leaned my forehead against the cold metal door, the vibration humming against my skull. As the floors ticked by, my mind did not move forward to the impending homelessness or the legal war I had just declared. Instead, it drifted backward, spiraling down into the wreckage of the last 5 years to find the exact moment where the fairy tale had begun to rot. To understand why I dialed that number on the balcony, you have to understand who I was before I became Arthur's doormat. I was born Lydia Fairmont, the sole heiress to Vanguard Holdings, a financial empire that swallowed smaller companies for breakfast. My mother, Evelyn Fairmont, was known on Wall Street as the Iron Lady of venture capital. To the world, she was a titan. To me, she was a calendar of board meetings and a critic of my posture. I grew up in a world where affection was a transaction and love was conditional on quarterly performance. I hated it. I hated the suffocating expectations, the fake smiles at charity balls, and the way every man who looked at me saw a walking bank vault rather than a human being. So, I ran. I legally changed my name, cut off my access to the trust funds, and vanished into the anonymity of the working class. I wanted to be real. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the Fairmont legacy. I got a job as a librarian in a dusty, underfunded branch in Brooklyn. I lived in a 4th-floor walk-up with faulty heating and cockroaches that scurried when the lights turned on. And I was happy, truly happy. That was where I met Arthur. He was sitting at a corner table in the reference section, surrounded by architectural blueprints that he had spread out like a war map. He looked exhausted. His shirt was frayed at the cuffs, and he had the desperate, hungry look of a wolf that had not eaten in days. I watched him for weeks before we spoke. I fell in love with his intensity. I fell in love with the way he ran his hands through his hair when he was frustrated, and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about lines and light and structural integrity. He told me he was going to change the skyline of New York. He told me he was a genius who just needed a break. He told me the world was blind to his talent. I believed him. God help me. I believed him. But passion does not pay the rent, and genius does not buy concrete. Arthur was drowning in student loans and rejection letters. Every firm in the city had turned him away. He was on the verge of giving up, of packing his bags and moving back to Ohio to work in his father's hardware store. I could not let that happen. I looked at this man, this passionate, beautiful, broken man, and I decided to break my one rule. I reached out to the past I had buried. I contacted my mother's personal attorney, a man who had known me since I was in diapers, and I set up a blind trust. I instructed him to approach Arthur as an anonymous angel investor, a representative of a private talent fund interested in disruptive architecture. I liquidated a portion of my personal savings, money I had sworn never to touch, and funneled it into Arthur's startup. I remember the night he got the call. We were eating pasta with jarred sauce in our tiny kitchen. He slammed the phone down, his face pale with shock. "They want to invest," he had whispered, his voice trembling. "Lydia, they want to give me $500,000, seed money, no questions asked. They loved my portfolio." He grabbed me and spun me around the kitchen, knocking over a chair. We laughed until we cried. He told me I was his lucky charm. He told me that his genius had finally been recognized. He never asked who the investor was. His ego was so large, so hungry for validation, that it never occurred to him to question why a mysterious fund would hand a fortune to an architect with 0 built projects. He just assumed he deserved it. He assumed he was simply that good. And I, the foolish girl in love, let him believe it. I wanted him to feel powerful. I wanted him to be the hero of his own story. So I stayed in the shadows. I continued working at the library, earning $15 an hour. While Arthur played the role of the rising CEO, I became the master of invisible economics. I stopped buying coffee so he could afford the imported espresso beans he claimed he needed to focus. I learned to sew so I could repair my own clothes, while insisting he buy bespoke Italian suits because appearance is everything in this business. I walked 40 blocks to work to save subway fare, putting the extra money into a jar for his client dinners. I remember one winter evening specifically. It was our 2nd anniversary. Arthur had a meeting with a potential developer at a high-end steakhouse. He needed a new watch to look the part. I used the money I had been saving for a root canal to buy him a vintage Omega. My tooth throbbed for 3 months, a dull, pulsing ache that kept me awake at night. But when he came home beaming because the developer had complimented his taste, the pain felt worth it. But as Sterling horizons grew, the distance between us widened. It started with small things. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped eating the dinners I cooked because he was too busy with clients. Then came the shame. "Do not come to the launch party tonight," he told me once, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. "It is just boring shop talk. You would not understand the terminology, and I do not want you to feel out of place." I nodded, swallowing the hurt. "Okay, have fun. And Lydia," he added, not looking at me, "maybe buy some new clothes? You look like you are going to a funeral." I looked down at my gray cardigan. It was the same one I had worn on our first date. He used to say it made me look cozy. Now, it made me look like a liability. The red flags were there, waving violently in my face, but I painted them white with my own denial. I saw him turning his phone screen face down whenever I walked into the room. I noticed the password changes on his laptop. I felt the recoil when I tried to touch his hand in public. And then, there was Bella Sinclair. She joined the firm 2 years ago as a junior secretary. She was bright, eager, and seemingly harmless. I liked her. I truly did. She would call the house to remind Arthur of appointments, and we would chat. I gave her advice on how to handle Arthur's moods. I thought of her as an ally when she was out sick with the flu last winter. I made a batch of my grandmother's chicken noodle soup. I took the subway to her apartment in the village to drop it off. I remembered standing outside her door, juggling the heavy thermos, feeling like a good person, a supportive wife of the boss caring for the employees. She had opened the door wrapped in a silk robe, looking surprised but grateful. "Oh, Lydia, you are too sweet. Arthur is lucky to have you." I smiled and handed her the soup. "Get well soon, Bella. The office falls apart without you." How they must have laughed at me. How they must have howled with laughter in bed later, mocking the naive wife who delivered soup to her husband's mistress. I realize now, with the clarity of a blade slicing through silk, that Arthur never loved me. Not really. He loved the way I looked at him. He loved having a cheerleader who required 0 maintenance. I was safe. I was the cozy harbor where he could dock his ship while he waited for the storm to pass. But the moment the sun came out, the moment he felt powerful enough to sail the high seas, I became nothing more than rotting wood, a reminder of the humble beginnings he wanted to erase. He married me because he thought I was a poor, simple girl who would be grateful for whatever crumbs of affection he tossed my way. He thought I was manageable. He thought I had no teeth. The elevator doors opened with a ding that sounded like a funeral bell. I stepped out into the lobby of the plaza. Keeping my head down to avoid the gaze of the concierge, I walked out into the biting New York night, the wind instantly freezing the wine stain on my dress into a stiff, dark patch. I raised my hand to hail a taxi. A yellow cab screeched to a halt. I slid into the back seat, the cracked leather smelling of stale tobacco and pine air freshener. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. He probably wondered why a woman in a cocktail dress looked like she had just lost a boxing match. I gave him the address. It was the address of the penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, the home I had spent weeks decorating, the home where I had planted tulips on the terrace just last week. "Make it quick, please," I said, as the taxi merged into the traffic of Fifth Avenue. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The adrenaline from the balcony was fading, replaced by a cold, heavy dread. I was going back to the scene of the crime. I was going back to pack my life into boxes while the man I made rich celebrated with the woman who stole my place. But Arthur had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was evicting a helpless librarian. He did not know he was evicting a Fairmont. He had challenged me to sue him. He had laughed at the idea of me fighting back. He thought the game was over because he held all the cards. I opened my eyes and watched the city lights blur past the window. The game had not even started. And when I was done with him, he would wish he had stayed in that dusty library with his failed blueprints and his empty pockets. The taxi slowed as we approached the building. It was a sleek glass tower, another testament to Arthur's genius. The doorman, a kind older man named Henry, whom I had baked cookies for last Christmas, was standing at the entrance. I paid the driver with a $20 bill, one of the last 3 in my purse, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. I looked up at the penthouse. The lights were off. Of course they were. Arthur was still at the party, basking in the glow of his own ego. I walked toward the revolving doors, my heels clicking a rhythm of war on the pavement. I was about to face the first humiliation of my new life. But I would not lower my head. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, inhaling the exhaust and the cold, and pushed through the doors. The warmth of the lobby hit me, but it did not thaw the ice in my veins. It was time to pack, and it was time to prepare for the slaughter. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was the longest journey of my life. I watched the floor numbers tick upward, my reflection in the polished brass doors looking back at me like a stranger. My hair was still damp from the wine Bella had spilled, and my mascara had begun to smudge, creating dark, bruised hollows under my eyes. I looked like a woman who had lost a fight, which, I suppose, I had, but the fight was only the first round. When the elevator doors slid open, I stepped into the private foyer that Arthur and I had shared for 3 years. I reached for the keypad on the wall, my fingers moving automatically to type in our anniversary date, the code we had used since the day we moved in. Bip, 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 bip. A harsh, dissonant buzz echoed in the small space. The small light on the panel flashed an angry red. Access denied. I frowned, my hand trembling slightly. I must have mistyped it. I tried again. Slower this time. Access denied. A cold stone dropped into the pit of my stomach. He had not just asked me to leave. He had erased me before I even arrived. "Mrs. Sterling?" I jumped, turning around. The service elevator behind me had opened quietly. Standing there was Henry, the building's head of security. Henry was a man I had known for years. I had bought Girl Scout cookies from his daughter every spring. I had given him a cashmere scarf last Christmas because I noticed he always caught a cold in January. He was not smiling. He held his cap in his hands, twisting the fabric nervously. He could not look me in the eye. "Henry," I said, my voice cracking. "The code is not working. There must be a system error. Could you let me in with the master key?" Henry looked at the floor, his face flushing a deep crimson. I cannot do that, ma'am. What do you mean you cannot? I asked, stepping toward him. I live here. My things are inside. He took a step back, as if I were contagious. He gestured toward the corner of the hallway, near the emergency stairwell. Your things are over there, ma'am. I followed his gaze. Lying on the marble floor, tossed haphazardly like garbage awaiting collection, was my old leather suitcase. It was the same battered luggage I had brought with me from my old life, the one Arthur always promised to replace but never did. It was unzipped slightly, a sleeve of a sweater poking out. Mr. Sterling called 20 minutes ago, Henry said, his voice low and apologetic. He said you were no longer a resident. He ordered the locks changed remotely. He had the staff pack your essentials. He said if you remained on the premises for more than 5 minutes, I was to call the police for trespassing. Trespassing. In the home where I had picked out the curtains, in the home where I had scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees before the cleaning service was hired. Henry, I pleaded, feeling the tears prick my eyes despite my resolve. Please, it is midnight. It is raining. Just let me inside to get my coat, to get my laptop. Henry finally looked up, and I saw a genuine pity in his eyes. It was the worst kind of look, the look one gives to a dying animal on the side of the road. I am sorry, Mrs. Sterling, truly, but I have a mortgage. I cannot lose this job. Please do not make me call the cops. Just go. I stared at him for a long moment. I realized then that kindness is a currency that devalues instantly when power enters the room. My Christmas cookies and scarves meant nothing against the wrath of Arthur Sterling. I walked over to the suitcase. It was heavy. I grabbed the handle, my knuckles turning white. I did not say goodbye to Henry. I dragged the bag into the service elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. When I stepped out onto the street, the sky had opened up. It was not a romantic, cinematic rain. It was a cold, aggressive downpour that soaked through my thin dress in seconds. I shivered violently, the water mixing with the dried wine on my chest to create a sticky, smelling mess. I needed to get away. I needed a plan. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I needed to book a hotel, a nice one, where I could shower and think. I tapped the screen. Account error. Please contact your branch. My heart hammered against my ribs. I switched to the credit card app. Card blocked. Reported lost or stolen. I stared at the screen, rain droplets blurring the terrifying red letters. He had been thorough. He had not just locked the door, he had locked down my entire existence, the joint accounts, the credit cards, even the emergency savings. Everything was in his name or under his primary control. I had trusted him completely. I had been the fool who believed marriage was a partnership, not a corporate merger where the CEO could fire the intern at will. I dug into my purse, my wet fingers fumbling through receipts and lipstick tubes. I found a crumpled $20 bill and 3 tens. $50. $50. That was the sum total of my net worth. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in my throat. I scrolled through my contacts. I had friends. I had people I had hosted for dinner. People I had gone to brunch with. Wives of Arthur's partners. Surely, someone would help. I called Sarah. She was the wife of Arthur's lead engineer. We had coffee every Tuesday. She answered on the third ring. The background noise was loud. Music, laughter. She was at the after-party. Lydia? Her voice was guarded. Sarah, I am so sorry to call so late, I said, my teeth chattering. Arthur locked me out. He froze the accounts. I am on the street. Can I come over? Just for tonight? There was a pause. I heard a muffled voice in the background. A man's voice. Then Sarah came back on the line. Look, Lydia, honestly, it is really awkward. Arthur just gave a speech. He said you guys are having issues. He said you have been unstable lately. Paranoid. Unstable? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. Sarah, he is with his mistress right in front of you. Bella is very nice. Lydia, Sarah said, her tone hardening. And Arthur is about to sign the contract for the new stadium. Bob's career depends on that project. We cannot get involved in your drama. You should probably just go stay with your family, or whatever. Please do not call again." The line went dead. I called 2 more people. The responses were variations on the same theme: fear, greed, indifference. They saw Arthur as the rising sun and me as the falling shadow. Nobody bets on the shadow. I lowered the phone. The city of New York, usually so full of life, suddenly felt like a vast, concrete tomb. I walked aimlessly, dragging the suitcase behind me, the wheels clattering loudly on the wet pavement. A memory surfaced, unbidden. I was 10 years old, sitting in my mother's office at Vanguard Holdings. She was signing documents, not looking up. "Love is a luxury for the poor. Lydia," she had said, her voice dry as parchment. "For people like us, there are only assets and liabilities. Never give anyone the power to turn you into a liability without your own capital. Love is just a word people use to pick your pocket." I had hated her for saying that. I had thought she was a monster. Tonight, shivering on Park Avenue with $50 in my pocket, I realized she was a prophet. I hailed a taxi. I could not stay here. I could not afford a hotel in Manhattan. I told the driver to take me to Queens, to a neighborhood I remembered from my days as a librarian. It was far enough away that I would not run into anyone I knew, and cheap enough that my $50 might buy me a roof. The ride ate up $30. The motel was called the Paradise Inn, a cruel joke of a name. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. The letter P burnt out so it read, "The Paradise Inn." The lobby smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial-strength lemon cleaner that failed to mask the scent of mildew. The clerk was a man with grease stains on his shirt and eyes that had seen too much. He did not ask for ID. He just took my last $20 and slid a plastic key across the scratched counter. "Room 104. Checkout is at 11. No guests." I walked to the room. It was small, damp, and freezing. The carpet was sticky. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners like dead skin. I dropped my suitcase on the sagging bed and sat down. This was it, rock bottom, the heiress of the Fairmont fortune, sitting in a $20 motel room, listening to the sirens wail outside, with nothing but the clothes on her back. I looked at the suitcase. Arthur had packed it, or rather, he had his staff pack it. I wondered what cruelty lay inside. I unzipped it. It was a mess. Clothes were shoved in haphazardly. My old jeans, t-shirts, the cardigan I wore on our first date. No jewelry, no expensive gowns. Just the old Lydia, but at the bottom, beneath a pile of socks. My hand brushed against something stiff. I pulled it out. It was a manila envelope, sealed with red wax. My breath hitched. I remembered this. A month ago, my mother's lawyer, the one I communicated with secretly, had met me in a park. He had tried to give me this file. "Just insurance," he had said. "Your mother wants you to have this. She has been investigating the company's financials. You need to read it." I had refused to open it. I had thrown it in the bottom of my suitcase, angry that my mother was spying on my husband. I wanted to trust Arthur. I wanted to believe in the man I loved. My hands shook as I broke the wax seal. I pulled out the documents. I began to read. The first page was a bank statement, an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The second page was a property deed, a loft in Tribeca, purchased 6 months ago. The owner of record was a shell company, but the signatory was Arthur Sterling. The tenant listed? Bella Sinclair. He had bought her a $2 million apartment using company funds. But as I turned the page, the bile rose in my throat. It was worse. There were transfers, massive ones. Arthur was not just spending profits. He was siphoning the principal capital, the money my mother had secretly invested. He was draining the company dry to fund a lifestyle he could not afford. And then, the final document, a draft of an email found on his private server. It was addressed to the SEC. Subject, whistleblower complaint regarding Lydia Sterling. I read the text, and the room spun. "I regret to inform you that my wife, Lydia Sterling has been using her access to my company's servers to sell proprietary designs to competitors. I have recently discovered these transactions. He was not just leaving me. He was framing me. He had set up a digital trail leading to my laptop. He was planning to blame the missing money on me. He was going to send me to federal prison for corporate espionage and embezzlement to cover his own tracks. He did not just want a divorce. He wanted to destroy my life so completely that I could never speak the truth. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Vibrating against the cheap wood, I picked it up. A text message from hubby. Do not try to come back. You have no value anymore. Be smart for once in your life and just vanish. If you make a scene, I will release the evidence of what you stole. Enjoy the gutter. Lydia, it is where you belong. I stared at the screen. The tears stopped. The shivering stopped. The fear that had been gripping my heart for the last 3 hours evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He thought I was weak. He thought I was the mouse he had caught in a trap. He had no idea that the mouse was actually a viper, and he had just stepped on its tail. I looked at the file. I looked at the text message. You have no value, he had written. I closed the file and placed it gently on the bed. I stood up and walked to the dirty mirror hanging over the dresser. I looked at my reflection. The ruined makeup, the wet hair, the cheap dress. Okay, Arthur, I whispered to the empty room. You want me to vanish? I will vanish. I reached for the phone again. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I deleted the contact, hubby. Then, I dialed the number I had called on the balcony. It was time to wake the dragon. The morning sun did not gently wake the residents of Queens. It pried open our eyelids with a harsh, gray glare that filtered through the smog. I was already awake. I had spent the night sitting in a stiff wooden chair by the window, watching the streetlights flicker and die. My hand resting on the manila folder that contained the autopsy of my marriage. At exactly 8 o'clock, the atmosphere of the street changed. The usual parade of rusted sedans and delivery trucks was interrupted by a silent predator. A black limousine, long and gleaming like a polished obsidian blade, turned the corner. It moved with a smoothness that suggested it was hovering above the potholes rather than driving over them. It glided to a halt directly in front of the peeling paint of the motel entrance. 2 men stepped out. They were identical in their imposing stature, wearing charcoal suits that cost more than the entire building they were standing in front of. They did not look at the overflowing trash cans or the stray cat hissing from under a dumpster. They scanned the perimeter with practiced indifference. Then one of them looked up directly at my window. I did not need to be told. I grabbed my suitcase, the wheels rattling one last time on the cheap linoleum, and walked out the door. I did not check out at the front desk. I simply left the plastic key on the nightstand. The Lydia, who worried about motel checkout policies, was dead. When I stepped onto the sidewalk, the first bodyguard opened the rear door. Ms. Fairmont, he said. Not Mrs. Sterling. Ms. Fairmont. The correction was subtle, but it felt like the first breath of oxygen I had taken in 24 hours. Take me to her, I said. The drive to Manhattan was silent. I sat in the leather interior, the tinted windows turning the chaotic world outside into a mute, distant film. We crossed the bridge, and I watched the skyline approach. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, Arthur was waking up in our penthouse, likely brewing his imported espresso, perhaps stroking Bella's hair, thinking he had successfully discarded his baggage. He had no idea the baggage was currently riding in an armored vehicle, coming to foreclose on his existence. The car pulled up to the Vanguard Tower. It was the tallest structure in the financial district, a monolith of steel and glass that pierced the clouds. This was the heart of the beast. This was where my mother ruled. We bypassed the main lobby. The guards escorted me to a private elevator that required a retinal scan to open. My eyes were red-rimmed and tired, but the scanner recognized the genetic code of a Fairmont instantly. The doors slid shut, and my ears popped as we ascended 60 floors in seconds. The doors opened directly into the boardroom. It was a cavernous space paneled in dark oak. The air chilled to a precise 68 degrees. At the far end of a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on sat Evelyn Fairmont. My mother had not aged a day in the 5 years I had been gone. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe, impeccable chignon. Her suit was sharp enough to draw blood. She was reviewing a document, her gold pen hovering over the paper like a hawk circling prey. She did not stand up. She did not smile. She did not offer a hug. "Sit," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast room. I walked the length of the table and sat in the chair opposite her. The distance between us felt familiar. It was the distance of negotiation, not intimacy. Evelyn finally looked up. Her eyes were the same shade of ice blue as mine, but harder. She studied my cheap, wrinkled dress, my unwashed hair, the dark circles under my eyes. She did not offer pity. She offered an assessment. "You look terrible," she stated. "I feel terrible," I replied, matching her tone. "Good," she said, closing the folder in front of her. "Comfort breeds weakness. Pain breeds clarity. I assume you have read the file I sent you?" I did. "And?" "He is stealing from the company," I said. "He is laundering money. He is framing me." Evelyn nodded once, a sharp jerk of her chin. "I told you he was garbage 5 years ago. I told you he was a parasite looking for a host. You called me cynical. You said I did not understand love." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "Do you believe me now, Lydia?" "I believe you," I whispered. Then, louder, "I believe you." Evelyn reached under the table and pulled out a thick document bound in black leather. She slid it across the polished wood. It stopped exactly at the edge of the table in front of me. "This is the transfer of authority," she said. "It grants you full executive control over the Dark Horse Fund. As you know, Dark Horse is the primary angel investor for Sterling Horizons. We hold 85% of the preferred stock. We hold the debt. We hold the intellectual property rights as collateral. Technically, Arthur works for us. He just does not know it yet." I looked at the document. It was not just a job offer, it was a weapon. "If I sign this," I asked, "what happens?" "If you sign this," Evelyn said, "you cease to be Lydia the librarian. You cease to be the victim. You become the CEO of his destruction. You have the power to call in his loans. You have the power to audit his books. You have the power to turn off the lights in his world." I picked up the heavy fountain pen lying on the documents. The weight of it felt good in my hand, solid, real. "I do not just want him bankrupt, Mother," I said, my voice steady. "I want him to know it was me. I want him to feel the ground crumble. I want him to understand that the woman he called worthless is the one holding the demolition switch." "Then sign," Evelyn said, "and let us get to work." I signed my name, Lydia Fairmont. The ink was black and permanent. As soon as I capped the pen, the side doors of the boardroom opened. 3 people walked in. They moved with the quiet confidence of professionals who were the best at what they did. "Lydia," Evelyn said, gesturing to the group, "meet your war counsel." She pointed to the first man, who was tall, thin, and wore a suit that looked like it had been cut with a razor. He had a smile that did not reach his eyes. "This is Mr. Thorne. We call him the Shark. He is the most aggressive litigator in New York. He will handle the divorce and the corporate restructuring." The Shark nodded to me. "It is a pleasure, Ms. Fairmont. I have already drafted the restraining orders and the asset freeze protocols. We are just waiting for your signal." Evelyn pointed to the second person, a woman with glasses so thick they magnified her eyes, giving her an intense, owl-like appearance. She was holding a tablet. "This is Ms. Lynn. We call her the Hawk. She is a forensic accountant. She can find a missing penny in a haystack of $1 billion. I have been tracking your husband's offshore movements," the Hawk said, her voice monotone. "He is sloppy. Greedy men usually are. He has moved $4 million into accounts in the Caymans. We can trace every cent. And finally, Evelyn pointed to a young man in a hoodie who looked out of place in the corporate boardroom. Though the watch on his wrist was worth more than a car. This is Cypher. We call him the Ghost. He heads our cybersecurity division. Cypher did not speak. He just tapped his laptop and turned the screen toward me. It showed a live feed. My breath caught in my throat. It was the interior of Arthur's office. I saw him sitting at his desk, laughing into the phone, spinning in his chair. I have access to his email, his phone, and the security cameras in the building, Cypher said softly. We see everything. I looked at the screen, watching the man who had thrown me out onto the street less than 12 hours ago. He looked so happy, so confident. He is preparing to sign the contract for the Twin Towers project this Friday, the shark said. It is the biggest deal of his career. If he lands it, the company valuation triples. He thinks he is about to become a king. He needs a capital injection to verify his liquidity for the contract, the hawk added. He sent a request to the Dark Horse Fund this morning for another $10 million. I looked at my mother. A small, cruel smile played on my lips. He wants money? I asked. He is desperate for it, Evelyn confirmed. Without it, the deal collapses. Then we give it to him, I said. The room went silent. The shark raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing. We give him the money, I repeated. Standing up, we approve the loan, we let him think he has won, we let him organize the signing ceremony, we let him invite the press, the city council, the investors. We let him climb to the very top of the mountain. I looked back at the screen, at Arthur's smiling face. And then, I said, when he is standing on the peak, holding that pen, thinking he owns the world, that is when I walk in. That is when we push him off. Evelyn stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, the corners of her mouth turned up. It was the first time I had seen her smile in a decade. That is my girl, she said. But first, I said, looking down at my wine-stained dress, I need to stop looking like a victim. The next 4 hours were a blur of efficiency. Evelyn had a team of stylists on standby in the executive suite. I did not want a makeover to look pretty. I wanted armor. I sat in the chair as the stylist held up a pair of scissors. How short? She asked. Cut it all off, I said. The long hair was for Arthur. He liked it because he could wrap it around his hand. I do not want anything he can grab onto. The scissors snipped. Locks of brown hair fell to the floor. With every cut, I felt lighter. I felt the weight of the submissive wife falling away. When she was done, I looked in the mirror, a pixie cut, sharp and modern, framed my face, my cheekbones, hidden for years, looked dangerous. They dressed me in a tailored white power suit. Pants, not a skirt. The fabric was crisp, the lines severe. I put on 4-inch stiletto heels that clicked like gunshots when I walked. I applied a dark, blood-red lipstick. When I walked back into the boardroom, the silence was total. The shark nodded in approval. The hawk adjusted her glasses. Ms. Fairmont, the shark said, you look like a CEO. I am a CEO, I corrected him. Now, I said, turning to the team. We have 1 week until the signing ceremony. For the next 7 days, Lydia Sterling is missing. She is crying in a shelter. She is gone. The person running the Dark Horse Fund is an anonymous director. Agreed, Evelyn said. Arthur will not know who is pulling the strings until it is too late. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. From this height, the people were not just ants. They were invisible. I felt a surge of power that was intoxicating. Arthur thinks money is power, I said to the reflection in the glass. He thinks fame is power. He is about to learn that power is not what you have. Power is what you can take away. I turned back to the room. Approve the $10 million transfer, I ordered. Let him buy his champagne. Let him buy Bella another diamond. Let him fatten himself up. Because next Friday, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room. We feast. The plan was set. Operation Debt Collection was live. I was no longer the wife, I was the retribution, and Arthur Sterling was already a dead man walking. He just had not read the obituary yet. 2 days. That is how long it took for the rot to set in. 2 days of silence from me, and Arthur Sterling's perfect kingdom began to exhibit its first structural failures. I sat in a leased office on the 35th floor of the building directly across the street from Sterling Horizons, staring at a bank of monitors. My new war room was sterile, filled with the hum of servers and the scent of cold brew coffee. But to me, it felt like a coliseum, through the high-definition security feeds that Cypher had tapped into. I watched Arthur arrive at work on Monday morning. He walked into the lobby with the swagger of a man who believed he was days away from becoming an icon. He was wearing a slate-gray suit that I knew cost $4,000 because I had organized the fitting myself. He waved dismissively at the receptionist, not bothering to stop, and headed straight for the private executive elevator, the one reserved exclusively for him and the board members. He pressed his keycard against the sensor. Nothing happened. I watched him frown, his eyebrows knitting together in confusion. He pressed it again, harder this time, as if force could override a digital lockout. The light on the panel remained a stubborn, unyielding red. He slapped the plastic card against the reader a third time, then looked around to see if anyone was watching. They were the lobby staff, the junior architects, the interns. They all saw the great Arthur Sterling denied entry to his own sanctuary, visibly irritated. He marched over to the front desk. I could not hear the audio from the lobby, but I could read his lips perfectly. Broken, fix-it, incompetent. He stormed toward the general employee elevator. I zoomed in on his face as the doors opened. It was packed with analysts and secretaries holding paper cups of coffee. Arthur Sterling, the visionary, was forced to squeeze himself between a courier and the mail cart, for a man who believed he was a god. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the mortals was the first insult of the day, but it was only the appetizer. By 10 in the morning, the real show began. I switched the audio feed to his corner office. Arthur was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, while his chief financial officer, a nervous man named Marcus, stood by the desk, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "What do you mean, frozen?" Arthur barked into the phone. "I spoke to the fund director last week. The transfer was approved." He listened for a moment, and his face flushed a deep, alarming shade of crimson. "A routine audit? Now? We are signing the Twin Towers deal in 4 days. I cannot have my liquidity locked up in compliance hell." He slammed the receiver down. The sound echoed through my speakers. He turned to Marcus. "Get the Dark Horse representative on the line. Now, tell them if they do not release the $10 million by noon. I am pulling the equity offer." It was a bluff. We both knew it. He needed that money like a diver needed oxygen. "I tried, Arthur," Marcus stammered, his voice trembling. "I have called 6 times. No one is picking up. They just sent an automated email stating that due to irregularities in recent expenditure reports, all disbursements are paused for a 72-hour review." "Irregularities?" Arthur laughed. But it was a manic sound. "I am the CEO. I decide what is regular. Fix this, Marcus, or you are fired." Marcus scurried out of the room like a frightened rat. I took a sip of my coffee. The irregularities were, of course, the invoices for Bella's diamond necklace and the lease on the secret apartment, which I had flagged through the forensic accounting team just hours ago. Before Arthur could catch his breath, his intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling?" His secretary's voice came through, sounding strained. "I have Mr. Kovac from Bedrock Concrete on line 2. He is shouting." Arthur groaned and jabbed the button. "Kovac, good morning. I was just—" "Save the charm, Sterling." A rough voice exploded from the speakerphone. "My accounting department tells me your last 3 checks bounced. Bounced. We have trucks loaded with rebar sitting in the yard. Nothing moves until I see a wire transfer for $200,000. Today." There must be a mistake, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a smooth, soothing tone that used to work on me. We are switching banks. It is just a clerical delay. Send the trucks, Kovac. You know I'm good for it. I know nothing, Kovac growled. I heard rumors. Arthur, people say the money tap has run dry. No cash, no steel. You have until 5 o'clock. The line went dead. Arthur stared at the phone, his chest heaving. He loosened his tie. The rumors, that was my mother's doing. A few whispers at the country club, a few raised eyebrows at a board meeting. And suddenly, the credit markets tightened like a noose, but the financial pressure was abstract. Arthur needed something personal to truly rattle him. At 1 p.m, Bella Sinclair made her entrance. I switched the feed to the conference room. Bella walked in, looking radiant in a white Chanel suit that I knew she had charged to the company expense account under office supplies. She did not knock. She threw a glossy brochure onto the table where Arthur was trying to eat a sandwich. I found it, she announced. The penthouse at 432 Park Avenue. It is perfect. Arthur, the view is better than your old place. And since you kicked Lydia out, we need a fresh start. A power base. Arthur looked at the brochure. I could see the panic in his eyes warring with his desire to impress her. Bella, babe, the timing is a little tight. We have the signing on Friday. So? She pouted, walking around the table to sit on his lap. You are the king of New York, aren't you? That is what you said in your speech. Kings do not rent. Arthur, kings buy. She ran a finger down his tie. Arthur swallowed hard. His ego was the lever, and she was pulling it with expert precision. Fine, he said, pulling out his wallet. He extracted the sleek, black American Express Centurion card issued to the company. The black card, the ultimate symbol of limitless wealth. Go to the sales office. Put down the deposit. I will have the lawyers handle the closing next week. Bella squealed and kissed him, leaving a smudge of pink lipstick on his cheek. She snatched the card and practically skipped out of the office. I picked up my own phone and dialed a number. Block it, I said. Done, the hawk replied instantly. I have flagged the card for suspicious activity. Limit set to 0. I waited. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the private investigator I had hired to tail Bella. He had sent a video file. I opened it. The footage was taken from a discreet distance inside the sales office of the luxury tower. Bella was standing at the reception desk, looking imperious. She handed the black card to the sales agent with a flourish. The agent swiped it, frowned, swiped it again. I am sorry, Ms. Sinclair, the agent said, his voice loud enough to be heard by the couple sitting on the nearby sofa. The card has been declined. Don't be ridiculous, Bella snapped. That is a Centurion card. It has no limit. Try it again. I have tried 3 times, ma'am, the agent said, his polite smile straining. The issuer says declined, do not honor. It usually means the account is overdrawn or frozen for delinquency. Bella's face went from smug to horrified in a second. The couple on the sofa whispered to each other and giggled. Bella snatched the card back, her face burning red. She stormed out of the lobby, dialing her phone furiously. Back in the office, Arthur's cell phone rang. He picked it up, expecting a sweet thank you. Instead, he pulled the phone away from his ear as Bella's screaming voice filled the room. You embarrassed me. Do you hear me? Arthur, you humiliated me. They looked at me like I was a pauper. Do not honor? What kind of CEO has his card declined? Bella, listen, it is a bank error, Arthur yelled back. Standing up, I told you, they are auditing the accounts. Fix it, she shrieked, or do not bother coming home tonight. She hung up. Arthur threw his phone across the room. It smashed into the wall, cracking the screen. He stood there, breathing heavily, his hands gripping the edge of his mahogany desk so hard his knuckles turned white. He was beginning to crack. It was time to widen the fissure. I opened a secure email client. I had prepared a document earlier that morning, a fabricated, but extremely convincing, Internal memo from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. It detailed an impending raid on Sterling Horizons and named Bella Sinclair as a person of interest and co-conspirator in a money laundering scheme. I attached it to an anonymous email and sent it to Bella's personal address. Subject: Get out while you can. Then, I sat back and watched the feed of Bella's office down the hall. 5 minutes later, she checked her phone. Her eyes widened. She zoomed in on the document. She paled. Bella Sinclair was a survivor. She was a parasite who moved from host to host, draining them dry before moving on. She had no loyalty to Arthur. She had loyalty only to her own survival. I watched as she slowly put the phone down. She looked around her office, as if checking for cameras. Then, she stood up and walked to the door, locking it. She went back to her desk and opened her laptop. She did not open design software. She opened the network drive. "Cypher," I said into my headset. "She is in?" "I see her," Cypher replied. "She is accessing Arthur's private folders. She is looking for the Cayman accounts. She is looking for an insurance policy." "Let her find them," I ordered. "Give her access to the hidden ledger, the one that shows Arthur moving money into her name without her consent." "Done," Cypher said. On the screen, Bella gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. We had planted a fake ledger that made it look like Arthur was setting her up to take the fall for the embezzlement. It was a lie wrapped in a truth, the most effective kind of deception. She grabbed a flash drive from her purse and jammed it into the USB port. She was copying everything. "Good girl," I whispered. Later that afternoon, my private investigator sent another batch of photos. They showed Bella sitting in a dim corner of a coffee shop in Midtown. Across from her was not a friend, but a man in a sharp blue suit. I recognized him immediately. It was Julian Thorne, the CEO of Apex Architecture, Arthur's bitterest rival. Bella was leaning in, showing Julian something on her phone. Julian looked interested. Very interesting. She was selling him out. She was trading Sterling Horizons secrets for a lifeboat. The final act of the day was the press conference. Arthur had scheduled it weeks ago to announce the Twin Towers project, the crown jewel of his career. He stood on a podium in the company atrium, the logo of Sterling Horizons gleaming behind him. He had composed himself, put on a fresh tie, and pasted on his best media smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, his voice projecting confidence, "we are on the verge of a new era. This project will redefine the city." "Mr. Sterling," a reporter from the Financial Times interrupted, not waiting for the QA. "Sources say your main line of credit has been frozen. Is Sterling Horizons insolvent?" Arthur froze. "I will not comment on unfounded rumors. As I was saying, the design." "Mr. Sterling," another reporter shouted, "is it true that Bedrock Concrete has ceased deliveries to your current sites due to non-payment?" "Mr. Sterling, is the IRS investigating your offshore holdings?" The questions came like a firing squad. There was no awe. There was no admiration. There was only the scent of blood. Arthur's smile twitched and died. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. "Who told you that? That is slander. We are financially robust. I will sue anyone who prints these lies." "Then why was your company card declined at 432 Park Avenue today?" a tabloid journalist shouted from the back. The room erupted in laughter and murmurs. Arthur looked like he had been slapped. He gripped the podium, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an enemy he could see, but the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. "This press conference is over," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Get out, all of you." He stormed off the stage, tripping slightly on a cable. The cameras flashed, capturing the image of a man in retreat. A man losing control. I sat in my office across the street, the lights off, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face. I picked up a pair of high-powered binoculars and walked to the window. I looked through the lenses. I could see into the atrium. I saw Arthur standing alone in the shadows of the hallway, leaning against the wall, pulling at his collar as if he were choking. He looked small. He looked terrified. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. My phone on the desk remained silent. He was calling his angel investor again. He was calling for his mother-in-law. Though he did not know it, I let it ring. Panic. Arthur, I whispered to the glass. Let the fear eat you alive, because the fall has not even started yet. I lowered the binoculars and smiled. It was a cold smile, devoid of the warmth I had wasted on him for 5 years. The first cracks had appeared in the foundation. Now, it was time to bring down the whole building. Wednesday morning arrived with the deceptive calm of a predator lying in wait. In my command center across the street, the air was thick with the hum of hard drives and the smell of ozone. We were about to hand Arthur Sterling the rope that would ensnare him, and we were going to make him think it was a lifeline. At 9 o'clock sharp, the shark sent the email. It was drafted on the official letterhead of the Dark Horse Fund, the entity Arthur still believed was his mysterious, benevolent patron. I watched on the monitor as Arthur opened it. He was sitting at his desk, looking like a man who had not slept in 48 hours. His tie was loosened, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was staring at his phone as if willing it to ring with good news. When the notification pinged on his laptop, he practically lunged at the mouse. I could see the relief wash over him as he read the subject line. Capital injection proposal. Series B. Funding round. He is reading it, I said to the room. Hook, line, and sinker. The email was a masterclass in corporate manipulation. It stated that Dark Horse was willing to overlook the temporary accounting irregularities and proceed with an immediate injection of $50 million. This money would clear his debts, pay the angry concrete suppliers, and secure the Twin Towers contract. But there was a catch, a small, seemingly bureaucratic clause buried in the third paragraph. Condition of funding, verification of intellectual property, to ensure the valuation of Sterling Horizons. The CEO must produce the original, hand-drawn schematics for the nebula and vertex designs to prove sole authorship and copyright ownership. I saw Arthur stop breathing. He froze. He read the sentence again, then a third time. To the outside world. The nebula and vertex designs were the revolutionary concepts that had put Arthur on the map. They were the reason he was called a genius. But Arthur and I knew the truth. Arthur was a good salesman. He was a decent draftsman. But he lacked vision. He could draw a building, but he could not dream one. 5 years ago, when he was drowning in whiskey and self-pity, because he could not crack the design for his first major competition. I had sat up with him. I had watched him pass out on the sofa, his sketchbook falling to the floor. I had picked up his charcoal pencil. I intended only to fix a perspective line, but then the ideas had started to flow. I saw the curves where he saw angles. I saw light where he saw walls. I spent the entire night drawing, filling 20 pages with the intricate, organic structures that would later become his signature style. When he woke up the next morning, hungover and miserable, he found the sketches. He never asked me if I drew them. He just assumed he had done it in a blackout state of brilliance. He called it his fugue state. I never corrected him because I wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to feel special, but I had signed them. Tiny, microscopic initials hidden in the cross-hatching of the shading. L.F. Lydia Fairmont. Arthur knew those sketchbooks existed. He kept them in a safe in his office, a shrine to his own lie, but he had never looked closely enough to see my signature. Now, terrified by the audit, he would look, and he would realize that the proof of his genius was actually proof of his fraud. On the screen. Arthur stood up so fast his chair toppled over. He scrambled to the wall behind his desk and moved a painting of himself to reveal a wall safe. His fingers fumbled with the combination. 1 turn, 2 turns, click. He swung the heavy door open. He reached inside, expecting to feel the leather-bound books. His hand grasped only air. He shoved his head into the safe, frantically feeling the corners. He pulled out stacks of cash, passports, and watches, throwing them onto the floor. But the black sketchbooks, the only things that mattered right now, were gone. "Where are they?" he screamed. his voice cracking. "Where are the damn books?" He began tearing the office apart. He ripped books off the shelves. He overturned the wastebasket. He looked like a madman. "He will not find them," I said softly, taking a sip of water, "because Bella is smarter than he gave her credit for." Bella Sinclair was a scavenger. When the credit card was declined and the IRS raid email hit her inbox, she knew the ship was sinking. She did not pack her bags immediately. She packed her leverage. She had known about the safe combination because she had watched him open it a dozen times, while Arthur was shouting at reporters yesterday. She had quietly emptied the safe of its most valuable contents, the sketchbooks that proved his fraud, and the hard drives he thought were secure. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I have the merchandise, the drawings and the digital keys. I want out. $500,000 and a one-way ticket to Paris. First class." It was Bella. "Pay her," I told the shark. "Arrange the meeting," while Arthur was destroying his office in a panic. Another document was making its way to his inbox. This one was delivered by a courier. Legally served to the receptionist. The divorce papers. Arthur's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, you have been served." Arthur stared at the door, sweat dripping down his face. He walked out, snatched the envelope from the receptionist, and marched back in. He ripped it open, expecting a battle. He expected me to demand half the company. He expected me to demand alimony, the penthouse, the cars. He was ready to fight. He read the terms. Petitioner, Lydia Sterling, waives all rights to marital assets, including but not limited to real estate, stock options, future earnings, and spousal support. Petitioner requests solely the following: full custody of Barnaby, the 10-year-old golden retriever. Arthur blinked. He looked up from the paper, a confused, arrogant smile spreading across his face. "The dog?" he muttered. "She wants the dog? That is it?" He started to laugh. It was a wet, ugly sound. "She is an idiot, a complete idiot. She is walking away from millions for a flea-bitten mutt." He grabbed a pen. He did not call his lawyer. He did not read the fine print. He was so eager to secure his victory, so eager to ensure I could not claim a cent of his future $50 million funding, that he signed the papers right there on his desk. "Done," he shouted to the empty room. "You lose. Lydia, you lose everything." I watched him sign, and I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my gut. He just signed his death warrant, the shark noted, closing his briefcase. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. By waiving my rights to the assets, I was also waiving my liability for the debts. In the state of New York, when a spouse assumes full ownership of a business in a divorce settlement without a contesting audit, they also assume full responsibility for its liabilities. Arthur just legally declared that Sterling Horizons and its mountain of hidden debt, its unpaid taxes, and the massive loan recall I was about to trigger was 100% his problem. I was free. He was the captain of the Titanic, and he had just locked himself in the wheelhouse. Meanwhile, across town, the final exchange was taking place. My assistant met Bella in the back of a dim jazz club in Greenwich Village. Bella looked nervous. She was wearing sunglasses indoors and kept checking the door. She slid a heavy tote bag across the table. Inside were the sketchbooks, and a scrap of paper with a string of alphanumeric characters, the passwords to Arthur's encrypted black ledger. "Is it all there?" my assistant asked. "Everything," Bella hissed. "The bribes to the zoning commission, the money laundering for the concrete mafia, the offshore shell companies, it is all on the cloud drive. That password gets you in." My assistant handed her a thick envelope containing a cashier's check for $500,000 and a boarding pass for Air France Flight 007, departing tonight. "Pleasure doing business," Bella said, snatching the envelope. "Tell Arthur, actually. Do not tell him anything. I hope he rots." She hurried out of the club, eager to start her new life in Europe. She did not know that the $500,000 was drawn from an account that the FBI was already monitoring as part of a larger sting operation I had tipped them off to. She would land in Paris. But she would not be spending that money, but that was a story for another day. For now, she had served her purpose. I typed the password Bella had provided into my terminal. Access granted, the screen filled with spreadsheets. It was a roadmap of corruption. Arthur had not just been spending money. He had been buying influence. I saw payments to city inspectors to ignore safety violations. I saw transfers to accounts linked to organized crime syndicates to intimidate labor unions. This was not just bankruptcy material. This was prison material. I downloaded everything, every receipt, every email, every damning number. Back in his office, Arthur was still manic. He had decided that if he could not find the sketchbooks, he would forge them. He was hunched over a drafting table, trying to recreate the nebula design from memory, but his hands were shaking. And without my help, the lines were stiff and lifeless. He crumpled page after page, screaming in frustration. He decided to go home. He needed Bella. He needed her to tell him he was a genius. He needed to vent his rage about me. He grabbed his coat and ran to the elevator. He did not notice the strange looks from the staff. He did not notice that the office was unusually quiet. He arrived at the temporary apartment he was renting, since the penthouse lock was still malfunctioning, my doing, and the new place Bella wanted had declined him. He burst through the door. "Bella, pack your bags. We are going to the Hamptons until this blows over." Silence. "Bella?" He walked into the bedroom. The closet doors were open. Her clothes were gone. The shelves were bare. He ran to the living room. The small safe he kept there, the one with his emergency cash and the diamond necklace he had bought her with company funds, was open. Empty. On the coffee table. There was no note, no apology, just his wedding ring, which he had given to her to resize for herself. She had stripped him clean. Arthur pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He dropped the phone. He sank onto the sofa, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The woman he had destroyed his marriage for, the muse he had flaunted in front of the world, had sold him out for cash. But I was not done. I wanted to make sure he did not sleep tonight. I opened the company-wide communication channel. As the anonymous owner of the Dark Horse Fund, I had administrative privileges on their server. I drafted a short email to all staff of Sterling Horizons, from payroll department, subject urgent, salary disbursement update. "Dear team, we regret to inform you that due to a critical liquidity crisis and the freezing of company assets by our primary lender, payroll for the current month has been suspended indefinitely. We advise all employees to cease work immediately until further notice. Please direct all inquiries to the CEO. Mr. Arthur Sterling." I hit send. Across the street, in the glass tower of Sterling Horizons, I saw the reaction instantly. Phones started lighting up. People stood up in their cubicles. Confusion turned to anger. Managers ran out of their offices. Then, I saw the lights go out on the trading floor. Then the design studio. I watched Arthur sitting in his empty apartment, staring at the wall, while his empire began to riot. He thought he had won the divorce. He thought he was free of the burden of Lydia. I petted Barnaby, who was sleeping at my feet under the desk. "He has no idea. Does he, boy?" I whispered. The phone on my desk rang. It was the shark. "The papers are filed," he said. "The debt transfer is complete. You are legally a stranger to his financial ruin." "Good," I said. "Now, release the evidence to the press. Send the bribery files to the New York Times." "Tonight?" "Tonight," I said. "Let him read about his crimes over breakfast." I looked out the window one last time. The rain had started again, washing the city clean. Arthur Sterling had wanted to be a legend. By tomorrow morning, he would be a cautionary tale. I stood up, smoothed my white suit, and picked up my bag. "Come on, Barnaby," I said. "Let's go home. Mom is waiting for us." We walked out of the war room, leaving the monitors glowing with the data of a dismantling life. The trap had snapped shut. The prey was caught. Now, all that was left was to skin the hide. Monday morning did not break over New York City. It shattered. From my vantage point in the war room across the street, the scene below looked less like the start of a business week and more like the beginning of a revolution. The sidewalk in front of the Sterling Horizons Tower, usually a pristine stretch of gray pavement where interns scurried with coffee trays, was now a sea of angry bodies. The email I had sent on Sunday night regarding the indefinite suspension of payroll had done its work. Over 200 employees, architects, draftsmen, administrative assistants, and janitors were massed at the entrance. They held hastily made signs scrawled with markers, "Pay us what you owe," and "Sterling is a fraud." The sound of their chanting rose up through the canyon of skyscrapers, a dull, rhythmic roar that vibrated against the glass of my window. Liar. Thief. Liar. Thief. I sipped my tea, watching the chaos with the detached interest of a director watching a complex scene unfold. "The police are setting up barricades," Cypher noted, not looking up from his monitors, "but they are not moving the crowd. The permit for a public assembly was filed anonymously at 4 this morning. It is perfectly legal." "Good," I said. "Let him run the gauntlet." At 8:30, Arthur's town car tried to turn onto the block. The moment the crowd recognized the license plate, the mood shifted from angry to volatile. Coffee cups and crumpled balls of paper pelted the sleek black vehicle. The driver, terrified, stopped the car 50 feet from the entrance. Arthur Sterling had to walk. I zoomed in with the camera. He stepped out of the car, and for the first time, he looked truly small. He was wearing the same suit he had worn yesterday, crumpled now, the tie missing. He kept his head down, flanked by 2 private security guards who looked like they were regretting their career choices. He pushed through the screaming mob, shielding his face with a briefcase that I knew contained absolutely nothing of value. "You ruined us. Arthur," a woman screamed, lunging at him before being held back by a barricade. I recognized her. It was Mrs. Gable, the head of HR, a woman who had defended Arthur for years. Loyalty, it seemed, had a price tag, and that price was a missed paycheck. Arthur stumbled into the lobby, the glass doors sliding shut behind him, cutting off the physical assault but not the noise. He leaned against the reception desk, gasping for air, looking like a shipwreck survivor washing up on a hostile shore. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the hurricane waiting for him inside. "Status on the valuation?" I asked the hawk. "It is a bloodbath," she replied, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Sterling Horizons is not a public company, but the private equity valuation on the secondary market has dropped 90% since the news of the payroll freeze leaked. Investors are dumping their promised shares. The company is effectively worthless. And the banks? "The notices were delivered by courier 3 minutes ago," the shark added. "Vanguard Holdings used its leverage as the underwriter for the syndicate. We have called in the loans." I watched the feed from Arthur's office. He had just collapsed into his chair when his secretary, a young woman who looked like she had been crying, walked in. She did not knock. She dropped a stack of red envelopes on his desk. "What is this?" Arthur snapped, his voice hoarse. "Urgent notices from First National and Chase," she said, her voice shaking. "They are invoking the material adverse change clause in our loan agreements. They are demanding full repayment of the mortgage on the headquarters and the construction loans for the Midtown project." Arthur ripped open an envelope. His eyes scanned the paper, widening with every line. 24 hours? He shrieked. "They want $40 million in 24 hours? That is impossible. Get me the bank president on the phone. I play golf with him." "He will not take your call, sir," the secretary said. "I already tried. His assistant said he is in a meeting, indefinitely." Arthur threw the letter at her. "Get out. Useless. All of you." She fled. Arthur grabbed his phone. I knew who he was calling. He was going down his list of friends, the wealthy developers, the hedge fund managers, the people who had drunk his champagne and laughed at his jokes. I signaled Cypher to tap the audio. "Jim." "It is Arthur. Listen, I am in a bit of a tight spot. Just a cash flow hiccup. I need a bridge loan. $2 million. I can pay you back double in a month, Jim? Jim? He dialed another number. Robert, how are you? Look, about that investment opportunity, what do you mean you heard? It is just gossip. Robert, do not hang up. He slammed the phone down. He was learning the hard way that in New York, failure is contagious. The Fairmont influence, my mother's whisper network, had branded him with a scarlet letter. He was radioactive. No reputable lender would touch him. Desperation makes men do foolish things. I saw him pull a crumpled business card from his wallet. It was a card for a hard money lender, the kind of people who charge 20% interest and broke kneecaps as a late fee. He dialed. He spoke in a hushed, pleading tone. Yes, I need cash today. I have collateral. The building, yes. There is a mortgage. But hello? Even the sharks were swimming away. The word was out. Sterling Horizons was not just sinking, it was already underwater. And then came the knock on the door that ends all arguments. It was 11 o'clock. The elevator doors to the executive suite opened, but it was not a client. It was not a lender. It was a phalanx of 6 men and women in blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. IRS. Criminal Investigation. Behind them came agents from the FBI. The office fell into a terrified silence. The phone stopped ringing. The weeping secretary stood up, her hands trembling. The lead agent, a tall woman with a face of stone, marched straight to Arthur's glass-walled office. She did not knock. She opened the door and flashed a badge. Arthur Sterling? Arthur looked up. The color drained from his face so completely, he looked like a wax figure. Yes. What is the meaning of this? We are executing a federal search warrant, the agent announced, her voice carrying through the open door to the silent floor of employees. We have probable cause to believe that Sterling Horizons has engaged in tax evasion, wire fraud, and the laundering of illicit funds. That is absurd. Arthur stood up, trying to muster some of his old arrogance. I demand to see your warrant. Who tipped you off? This is harassment. The warrant is here, she said, slapping a document onto his desk, and we have a sworn affidavit from a cooperating witness, along with digital logs from your internal server. Arthur's eyes darted to the empty safe where the sketchbooks and hard drives used to be. The realization hit him. Bella. He thought it was Bella. Sit down. Mr. Sterling, the agent ordered. You are being detained for questioning while we secure the premises. Do not touch your computer. Do not touch your phone. Agents began swarming the office. They were pulling files from cabinets, disconnecting hard drives, and boxing up papers. It was the systematic dismantling of his life. Arthur sat in his leather chair, watching his empire get packed into cardboard boxes. He looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, looking for a savior. His gaze landed on the phone on his desk. The agents were busy with the filing cabinets. He reached for the receiver slowly. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He had one card left to play. The ace, the mysterious angel investor from the Dark Horse Fund who had promised him $50 million just days ago. The investor who had claimed to be his partner. Surely, they would not let their investment go down in flames. Surely they would bail him out to save their own equity. I watched him dial the number. It was the direct line to the chairperson of the Dark Horse Fund. In my office across the street, the red phone on my desk began to ring. The room went silent. The shark, the hawk, and Cypher all turned to look at me. I let it ring once, twice, let him sweat, let him pray. On the third ring, I picked up the receiver. This is the chairperson, I said. My voice was calm, professional, and stripped of any emotion. It is Arthur Sterling, Arthur whispered frantically into his phone, hunching over so the agents would not hear him. You have to help me. The IRS is here. The banks are calling the loans. It is a disaster. I am aware of the situation, Mr. Sterling, I replied. It is on the news. The news is wrong, he hissed. It is a conspiracy. My ex-wife is behind this. She is trying to ruin me. But the designs are mine. The value is real. You have to wire the funds now. The 50 million. If you wire it, I can pay the banks. I can make the IRS go away. Please, you are my partner." I paused. I looked at the screen where I could see him sweating, his knuckles white on the receiver. "I cannot do that, Arthur," I said. "Why not?" He sounded like he was about to cry. "You promised. You said you believed in my vision." "I said I believed in the investment," I corrected him. "But upon review of the assets, we have found that the vision was never yours to begin with." Arthur froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean the sketchbooks, Arthur," I said. "The ones with the initials LF hidden in the shading, the ones Bella sold to us." He gasped. "Who are you?" he whispered. "How do you know about that?" "I know a lot of things," I said. "I know about the apartment in Tribeca. I know about the bribes to the concrete union. I know about the diamonds you bought with my mother's money." "Your mother?" Arthur's voice cracked. He pulled the phone away from his ear and looked at it, as if the device itself had betrayed him. Then he put it back. "Who is this? Is this a joke? Put the chairperson on." "You are speaking to her," I said. I let the silence stretch for a heartbeat. "Hello, Arthur. It has been a long week, has it not?" On the screen. Arthur's face went slack. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He recognized the cadence. He recognized the tone. "Lydia?" he breathed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. "No, that is impossible. You are broke. You are in a motel. You are nobody." "I was never nobody. Arthur," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "I was the foundation you built your house of cards on, and you made the mistake of thinking the foundation was just dirt." "You hacked the line," he shouted. Forgetting to whisper, the IRS agents turned to look at him. "This is a trick. Lydia, I swear to God, stop playing games. Where is the real investor?" "I am the investor, you idiot," I said, dropping the corporate mask. "The Dark Horse Fund belongs to Vanguard Holdings. Vanguard Holdings belongs to Evelyn Fairmont, and Evelyn Fairmont is my mother. Welcome to reality." Arthur stood up, knocking his chair over. No, you are lying. You are a poor orphan. I saved you." "You did not save me," I said coldly. "I bought you. I bought your suits. I bought your office. I bought your career. And because you broke the contract of our marriage, I am issuing a refund." "Lydia, please," he stammered, his brain finally catching up to the magnitude of the disaster. "Lydia, wait, we can talk. I still love you. We can fix this. I will fire Bella. I will give you half the company." "I do not want half the company, Arthur," I said. "I own the debt, which means I own it all. And you? You own nothing but a prison sentence." "You bitch!" he screamed, hurling the phone base across the desk. "You planned this. You set me up." "Goodbye, Arthur," I said. I hung up the phone. On the screen, Arthur was screaming at the dial tone. He looked like a madman. The lead IRS agent signaled to her team. 2 male agents stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, you are making a scene," the agent said. "Stand up and put your hands behind your back." Arthur struggled as they grabbed his arms. He was shouting my name. He was shouting that he was a genius. He was shouting that it was all a mistake. I turned to the shark. "Trigger the default," I ordered. "Execute the personal guarantee clause. Seize everything, the apartment, the cars, the watch on his wrist. I want him to leave that building with absolutely nothing." "Consider it done," the shark said. Hitting the enter key on his laptop, I looked back at the screen one last time. Arthur was being led out of his office in handcuffs. The employees outside the glass walls were not cheering. They were just watching in stunned silence. The king had fallen, and he had fallen hard. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't joy. It was the feeling of a heavy burden finally being set down. The debt was paid. The balance was restored. "Let's go get some lunch," I said to my team. "I'm starving," Paris was calling. But the NYPD answered first. While I was busy dismantling Arthur's empire from my command center, Bella Sinclair was attempting her own grand exit. My private investigator sent me the details later, and I must admit, reading the report gave me a sense of dark, twisted amusement. It was like watching a slapstick comedy where the clown slips on a banana peel. Except the banana peel was a federal arrest warrant, and the clown was wearing stolen diamonds. Bella had arrived at JFK International Airport with the confidence of a woman who had just successfully robbed a bank. She checked into the first-class lounge, ordered a glass of champagne, and likely spent her time scrolling through real estate listings in the Marais district. She had $500,000 in a cashier's check and a head full of dreams. She thought she was the heroine of a spy movie, the clever femme fatale who outsmarted the men and vanished into the sunset, but real life has a way of ruining the script. When she approached the gate for Air France Flight 007, she handed her passport to the agent with a bored, haughty expression. The agent scanned it. The machine did not beep with a happy confirmation. Instead, it let out a low, ominous buzz. The screen flashed red. "Is there a problem?" Bella had asked, tapping her manicured nails on the counter. "I am in a hurry." "Just a moment, ma'am," the agent said, his eyes widening as he read the alert. He picked up his radio. "We have a code red at gate 4. Name matches the watch list." Before Bella could snatch her passport back, 2 officers from the Port Authority Police stepped out from the jet bridge. They were not smiling. "Bella Sinclair?" one asked. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You are under arrest for the possession of stolen intellectual property, corporate espionage, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "What? No!" Bella shrieked, causing the line of business-class passengers to turn and stare. "This is a mistake. I am a victim. Arthur made me do it." They handcuffed her right there on the plush carpet of the terminal. As they led her away, kicking and screaming about her rights and her fragile wrists, she dropped her carry-on bag. The zipper burst open, spilling not clothes, but stacks of confidential blueprints she had tried to smuggle out as insurance. She never made it to Paris. She made it to a holding cell in Queens, which I hear has terrible room service. 3 hours later, I walked into the precinct. I was not there to bail her out. I was there to close the deal. I had changed my outfit for the occasion. I wore a cream-colored structural blazer from the latest Alexander McQueen collection, paired with wide-leg trousers that flowed like liquid silk. On my wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Bella's annual salary. I looked like money. I looked like freedom. When the officer led me into the interrogation room, Bella was sitting at a metal table. The transformation was startling. The glamour was gone. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black rivers. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles, and she was shivering in her thin designer dress. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes went wide. She looked at my clothes, then at my face. She saw the Lydia she had mocked, but refined, sharpened, and polished into a weapon. "Lydia," she croaked. You look expensive?" I finished for her, pulling out the metal chair and sitting down. I placed my handbag on the table, a deliberate move to show her the logo. "I know. It is amazing what happens when you stop spending your money on a man who does not deserve it." "He set me up," Bella blurted out, leaning forward. "Lydia, you have to believe me. Arthur is a monster. He made me steal those files. He threatened me. I was just a pawn." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. The audacity of this woman was breathtaking. "Bella, please, save the tears for the jury. I saw the video of you at the sales office. I saw you trying to buy a penthouse with a stolen credit card. You were not a pawn. You were a partner. And now you are a liability." "I can help you," she whispered, her eyes darting to the mirror on the wall. "I know things. I can testify. I already have the files." "Bella," I said coldly, "you sold them to me, remember? I have the evidence. I do not need you to prove Arthur is a crook. I need you to destroy his character." I leaned in closer. Here is the deal. I can press charges against you for the theft of the sketchbooks and the hard drives. My lawyers are very good. They will argue that you were the mastermind. You will get 5 to 10 years in prison. You will be 35 when you get out. Your looks will be gone. Your reputation will be ashes. Bella paled. The vanity was her weak spot. Or, I continued, you can become the star of the show. I want you to go public. I want you to tell the world that Arthur Sterling is not just a fraud, but a predator. You paint yourself as the naive, innocent girl who was manipulated by a powerful, abusive CEO. You cry. You apologize. You throw him under the bus so hard they have to scrape him off the pavement. If I do that? She asked, calculating. If you do that, I drop the theft charges, I said. I will tell the DA that you were cooperating with the investigation from the start. You walk away with probation. You keep your freedom. Bella did not hesitate for even a second. There was no loyalty in her body, only survival instinct. Give me a phone, she said. The performance that followed was Oscar-worthy. We arranged for her to be released on bail, which I paid anonymously, a small investment for the show that was about to follow. 2 hours later, Bella posted a video across all social media platforms. She sat in front of a plain white wall, wearing no makeup, looking small and fragile. She looked directly into the camera lens with big, watery eyes. Hi, everyone, she began, her voice cracking perfectly. My name is Bella, and for the last 6 months, I have been living in a nightmare. I watched the video from my phone in the back of my limousine. It was brutal. Arthur Sterling told me he loved me, Bella said, wiping a tear. He told me his wife was crazy. He told me he was separated. I didn't know he was using me to launder money. He forced me to sign documents I didn't understand. He said if I didn't do what he asked, he would ruin my career. He controlled everything. My clothes, my phone, my life. She sobbed. I am so sorry to everyone who was hurt. I am just a girl who wanted to design buildings. I didn't know I was building a prison. The internet exploded. Within 30 minutes, the hashtag Surviving Sterling was trending #1 globally. The comments were vicious. Arthur Sterling is a predator. Lock him up. Poor Bella. She looks terrified. Cancel Sterling Horizons immediately. Arthur was no longer just a failed businessman. He was a social pariah. He was a villain, and the fallout was immediate. While the video was racking up millions of views, Arthur was being released from the IRS field office. They had held him for 12 hours of questioning. They had confiscated his passport and released him pending further investigation. He walked out of the building into the late afternoon sun, looking dazed. He reached into his pocket for his phone, but the agents had kept it as evidence. He was cut off from the world. He walked to the curb, expecting his driver. The curb was empty. He looked around, confused. He spotted a towing sign nearby. Then he remembered. The lease on the company car, the Maybach he loved more than he had ever loved me, was in the company's name, the company that had just defaulted on its debts. His car had been repossessed while he was being interrogated. Fine, he muttered, adjusting his jacket. I will take a cab. He flagged down a yellow taxi. He hopped in. 157 West 57th Street. The driver looked at him in the rearview mirror. Cash up front, pal. You look like you had a rough day. Arthur reached for his wallet. He pulled out his personal platinum card. He handed it to the driver. The driver swiped it on the mobile terminal. Beep. Declined. Try another one, the driver said, annoyed. Arthur pulled out his gold card. Beep. Declined. He pulled out his debit card, the one linked to his personal checking account. Beep. Declined. Get out, the driver said. Wait, Arthur stammered. There is a mistake. I am Arthur Sterling. I have millions. Yeah, and I am the Pope, the driver said. Get out before I call the cops. Arthur stood on the sidewalk, humiliated. Passers-by were starting to stare. Some were pointing phones at him. They had seen the video. They recognized the villain. Hey, "That is him!" a teenager shouted. "That is the guy who scammed that girl!" "Scumbag!" someone else yelled. Arthur put his head down and started walking. He had to walk 40 blocks to the penthouse. He was wearing Italian leather shoes that were designed for boardrooms, not for the cracked pavement of Midtown Manhattan. It began to rain again, a light, miserable drizzle that soaked into his suit. He walked past a newsstand. The evening edition of the Post was already out. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "Sterling silver? More like sterling steel." Below it was a photo of him being led away in handcuffs. He kept walking. His feet blistered. His stomach growled. He passed a hot dog stand, but he didn't have $3 in cash to buy one. He realized with a jolt of horror that he was poorer than the homeless man sleeping on the bench he just passed. At least the homeless man had a sandwich. By the time he reached his building, he was limping. He was soaked. He was exhausted. He pushed through the revolving doors, desperate for the sanctuary of his home, desperate for a hot shower and a drink. Mr. Sterling, Henry, the doorman, stepped in front of the elevators. He blocked Arthur's path. "Henry, thank God," Arthur breathed. "Let me up. I lost my keys. And get me a bottle of water." Henry did not move. He crossed his arms over his chest. His face was stony. "I cannot let you up, sir." "What?" Arthur snapped. "Do not start with me. Henry, I own the penthouse." "Not anymore," Henry said. He pointed to a piece of paper taped to the marble wall next to the elevator bank. It was an eviction notice, issued by the bank. Notice of foreclosure and seizure. Property, penthouse. A. Status, sealed by order of the court. Reason: default on mortgage and personal guarantee. The bank representatives came an hour ago, Henry explained, his voice devoid of sympathy. They changed the locks. They put tamper tape on the doors. You are not allowed on the premises. "But my clothes!" Arthur shouted. "My watch collection! My life!" "Inside the sealed property," Henry said. "You will have to petition the court to retrieve personal items. It usually takes 6 to 8 weeks. Arthur stared at him. "Henry, please, it is me. I gave you $100 for Christmas." "And your wife gave me respect," Henry said. "Please leave, Mr. Sterling, or I will have to call the police for trespassing." Trespassing. The word echoed in Arthur's mind. It was the exact word he had used on me a week ago. He turned around and stumbled back out onto the street. The rain was heavier now. He looked up at the building, at the dark windows of the apartment where he had felt like a god. He looked down at his shoes, ruined by the water. He looked at his empty hands. He had no phone, no money, no car, no home, no wife, no mistress, no reputation. He stood on the corner of 57th Street and 7th Avenue, surrounded by the city he claimed to own, and realized he was completely invisible. He was experiencing the exact moment he had forced upon me. The cold, the fear, the absolute zero of hitting rock bottom. But unlike me, he had no mother to call. He had no secret inheritance. He had no plan. He sat down on the wet steps of a closed luxury boutique. He put his head in his hands, and then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, a car drove by. It was a taxi. On the digital billboard on top of the taxi, an advertisement flashed bright and colorful. It was an ad for a new architectural firm, Phoenix Architecture, rising from the ashes, building the future with integrity. Arthur stared at the ad. He didn't know the name yet, but he felt a shiver run down his spine that had nothing to do with the rain. He was alone in the dark, and the monsters were just starting to come out. The summons was delivered to Arthur not by a courier in a crisp uniform, but by a process server who found him sleeping on a bench in Central Park. It was an extraordinary general meeting notice for the shareholders of Sterling Horizons. The location was not his office. It was the 48th floor of the Vanguard Tower. I sat at the head of the boardroom table, the same table where I had signed the papers to destroy him just days earlier. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of my mother's pen against her leather notebook. Evelyn sat to my right. looking like a statue carved from judgment and ice. To my left were the Shark, the Hawk, and Cypher, my generals in this war. We were waiting for the prisoner to arrive for his execution. At 10 o'clock sharp, the heavy oak doors swung open. The man who stumbled into the room was unrecognizable as the charismatic visionary who had graced the cover of magazines a week ago. Arthur Sterling looked like a specter haunting his own funeral. His suit was wrinkled and stained with mud around the cuffs. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a neck slick with sweat. His face was covered in a patchy, 2-day stubble, and his eyes were wild, darting around the room with the frantic energy of a cornered rat. He did not see me at first. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows created a silhouette effect. He only saw the shapes of people sitting in judgment. "Who is in charge here?" Arthur shouted, his voice cracking. He tried to project authority, but it came out as hysteria. "I demand to speak to the owner of the Dark Horse Fund. You cannot just steal my company. I have rights. I am Arthur Sterling." He marched toward the head of the table, waving the crumpled summons in his hand. "I want answers. Who is behind this? Show your face." I leaned forward. Moving out of the glare of the sun, the light hit my face, illuminating the sharp cut of my hair, the diamonds in my ears, and the cold, unyielding set of my jaw. "Hello, Arthur," I said. Arthur froze mid-step. His arm dropped. His mouth fell open. He blinked, once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination from his vision. "Lydia?" he whispered. He looked at me. Then he looked at Evelyn Fairmont, the woman whose face had been on the business pages for decades, the woman he knew was one of the most powerful figures in finance. He looked back at me, and then I saw the exact moment his brain finally connected the circuit. The color drained from his face so violently, I thought he might faint. He staggered back, gripping the back of an empty chair for support. "No," he muttered. "No, no, no. It cannot be." "Sit down, Arthur," I commanded. He collapsed into the chair at the opposite end of the table. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches after burning the house down. "You," he gasped, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are the investor? You are Dark Horse?" "I am," I said, my voice echoing in the large room. "And I am also the wife you tried to frame for federal crimes. I am the woman you called worthless. I am the orphan you thought you saved." Arthur shook his head, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. The memories were flooding back to him. I could see it in his eyes. He was remembering the times I had casually suggested he look at a certain tax loophole. He was remembering the times money had miraculously appeared in the company accounts just when he was about to miss payroll. He was remembering how I, a simple librarian, always seemed to understand complex contract law. He had thought I was lucky. He realized now that he had been living in a terrarium, and I was the one controlling the climate. "You played me," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and horror. "For 5 years, you watched me struggle. You watched me beg. I watched you build," I corrected him. "I gave you the tools. I gave you the capital. I gave you the emotional support. I gave you a life, Arthur. And what did you do with it? You used it to buy a penthouse for a mistress and tried to send me to prison to cover your tracks." I picked up the thick file sitting in front of me. It contained the autopsy of his character, the photos of him with Bella, the bank transfers to the shell companies, the emails he had drafted to the FBI blaming me for his theft. I threw the file down the length of the long table. It slid across the polished wood with a hiss, stopping inches from his hand. "Read it," I said. Arthur stared at the file. He did not open it. He knew what was inside. "Lydia," he started, his voice shifting. He licked his dry lips. He sat up straighter, running a hand through his greasy hair, trying to summon the charm that had worked on me for so long. "Lydia, baby, listen to me. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I raised an eyebrow. "You forging my signature on a federal indictment was a misunderstanding?" I was scared, Arthur cried out. He stood up and began to walk toward me, his hands held out in a pleading gesture. The business, the pressure it got to me. I did not know what I was doing. I was drowning. Lydia, I did it for us. I wanted to be the man you deserved. I wanted to give you the world. You wanted to give Bella Sinclair a penthouse, I said flatly. Do not insult my intelligence. Arthur fell to his knees. Right there on the plush carpet of the Vanguard boardroom, Arthur Sterling, the man who had sneered at waiters and belittled his staff, dropped to his knees and crawled the last few feet toward me. He grabbed the edge of the table, looking up at me with tears streaming down his face. She tricked me! Lydia! He sobbed. Bella! She is a witch. She seduced me. She drugged me. I never loved her. I only ever loved you. You are my wife. You are the only real thing in my life. Please, Lydia, I know you are angry. You have every right to be angry, but do not destroy me. Do not destroy us. I can change. We can run this company together. With your money and my talent, we can be unstoppable. Just give me one more chance. I looked down at him. 5 years ago, this sight would have broken my heart. I would have held him. I would have forgiven him. But the Lydia who would have done that was dead. She had died the night he locked her out in the rain. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a profound, clinical detachment. I was looking at a stranger. Your talent? I repeated softly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the black sketchbook, the one Bella had stolen and sold to me. I opened it to the page of the nebula design. I turned it around and shoved it into his face. Show me, I said. Show me where you drew this. Arthur looked at the drawing. He looked at the intricate shading, the complex geometry. He swallowed hard. You cannot, I said, because I drew it, while you were passed out drunk on the floor. I drew every major design Sterling Horizons ever produced. You were never the architect. Arthur, you were just the pencil I used. Arthur recoiled as if I had slapped him. The myth of his own genius was the only thing he had left, and I had just shattered it. I loved you, he whispered, his voice broken. I really did. No, Arthur, I said, my voice devoid of pity. You did not love me. You loved the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes. You loved the pedestal I built for you. You loved the safety. But you never bothered to look at the person holding the pedestal up, and the moment you thought you were tall enough to stand on your own, you kicked me away. I leaned closer, my face inches from his. Well, you are standing on your own now. How does it feel? Arthur slumped back on his heels, defeated. He looked at Evelyn. Mrs. Fairmont, he pleaded, trying one last angle. You are a businesswoman. You know that destroying the company is bad business. We can make a deal. I will sign over the equity. Just keep me on as a consultant. Don't let the name Sterling die. Evelyn Fairmont stood up. She did not look at Arthur. She looked through him. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice crisp and sharp. This company was built with my daughter's inheritance. It was sustained by my daughter's talent, and it was protected by my daughter's patience. You are under the impression that you have something to bargain with. You do not. She walked over to the window and looked out at the city. As for the name Sterling, it is already dead. As of this morning, the board has voted to dissolve the entity known as Sterling Horizons. The assets will be liquidated to pay the creditors. The intellectual property has been transferred to a new holding company. She turned back to him. You are not a consultant. You are a trespasser. Evelyn pressed a button on the intercom. Security, remove him. 2 large men in dark suits entered the room. They did not speak. They simply grabbed Arthur by the arms and hauled him to his feet. No, Arthur screamed, struggling against their grip. You cannot do this. I am the CEO. I am Arthur Sterling. Lydia, help me. I am your husband. I did not look away. I watched him struggle. I watched the spit fly from his mouth. I watched the complete disintegration of a man who thought he was a god. Take him out, I said calmly. They dragged him toward the door. He dug his heels into the carpet, leaving streaks in the plush wool. I will sue you, he shrieked. I will kill you. You ruined my life. You ruined it yourself, Arthur, I said. I just turned on the lights. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not oppressive. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. The shark checked his watch. The timing is perfect, he said. He is heading down to the lobby now. Is everything in place? I asked. The FBI is waiting by the revolving doors, the shark confirmed. Bella's testimony regarding the money laundering was very specific. They have the warrant, and the press well. Let us just say the lobby is a full house. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the street. 60 floors below. I could see the swarm of news vans and the flashing lights of police cruisers. Down in the lobby, the final act was playing out. I could not see it, but I knew exactly what was happening. Arthur would be thrown out of the elevator by my security team. He would stumble into the atrium, disheveled and raving. He would see the exit and think he was free. He would run toward the doors, thinking he could disappear into the crowd, but the doors would not open for him. Instead, a wall of agents in windbreakers would step forward. Arthur Sterling, an agent would shout, you are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. Arthur would try to run. He always tried to run, but there would be nowhere to go. They would slam him against the glass wall, the very glass he used to prize so much in his designs. They would twist his arms behind his back. The cold metal of the handcuffs would click shut, and then the flashbulbs would erupt. Hundreds of cameras would blind him. Every major news network would broadcast the image live. The golden boy of New York architecture, pressed against the glass like a bug, handcuffed and broken. He wanted fame. He wanted the world to know his name. Now, they did, back in the boardroom. I turned to my mother. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like her daughter. The disappointment, I felt like her equal. It is done, I said. Evelyn nodded. A rare look of respect crossed her face. You handled that well. You didn't waver. I learned from the best, I replied. What now? She asked. I looked at the empty chair where Arthur had sat. I looked at the file on the table. Now, I said, picking up my bag. We let the law handle the garbage. I have a company to build. A real one this time. I walked toward the door. I did not look back. The ghost of Arthur Sterling was exorcised. The room felt lighter. The air felt cleaner. I walked to the elevator, ready to descend into the chaos one last time. Not as a victim, but as the woman who had walked through the fire and came out holding the torch. 6 months. That is how long it takes for the seasons to change from the biting frost of winter to the golden warmth of early summer. It is also, as I have learned, exactly how long it takes to scrub a stain out of the fabric of your life, provided you use the right amount of bleach and a lot of hard work. The trial of Arthur Sterling concluded yesterday afternoon. It was not the media circus that the arrest had been. The cameras had moved on to the next scandal, the next fallen idol. The courtroom was quiet, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. I sat in the back row, wearing a simple linen suit, watching the back of the man who had once promised to love me until death did us part. When the judge read the verdict, Arthur did not scream. He did not cry. He just slumped forward, his shoulders collapsing as if the strings holding him up had finally been cut, guilty on 18 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The sentence was 12 years in federal prison, 12 years of waking up in a cage, 12 years of being told when to eat, when to sleep, and when to speak. For a man who needed control like he needed oxygen, it was a fate worse than death. As the bailiffs led him away, he turned his head slightly. Our eyes met across the gallery. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a rush of vindication. I expected to smile at him, but I felt nothing. The hate had evaporated, leaving behind only a dull, distant pity. He looked like a ghost of someone I used to know, a stranger whose story I had finished reading. I stood up and walked out of the courtroom before they closed the heavy doors behind him. Bella Sinclair did not go to prison. Her testimony was the nail in Arthur's coffin, and the district attorney honored the deal. She received 5 years of probation and a permanent criminal record. But the industry sentence was far harsher. The Council of Fashion Designers of America and the American Institute of Architects both issued lifetime bans. Her name was toxic. I saw her a week ago, purely by accident. I was meeting a supplier in a gritty part of New Jersey. I stopped at a roadside diner for a coffee. She was there, wearing a stained polyester apron, wiping down a sticky table with a gray rag. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, the blonde dye growing out to reveal dark roots. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. She saw me, and for a second, I saw the old spark of envy in her eyes. But it was quickly extinguished by shame. She looked down and hurried into the kitchen. I left a $20 tip on the table and walked away. She was living in the reality she had created. That was punishment enough. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to the ruins of Sterling Horizons. The company was dissolved, its assets auctioned off to pay the creditors. The name that Arthur had been so desperate to etch into the skyline was now just a footnote in business school textbooks about corporate ethics failures. But buried in the wreckage were diamonds in the rough, the junior architects, the draftsmen, the project managers, the people Arthur had screamed at, underpaid, and stolen credit from. They were talented, and they were unemployed. I gathered them in a rented loft in Brooklyn, a space with exposed brick and big windows that let in the honest sunlight. I stood on a crate and looked at the 30 faces looking back at me with skepticism and hope. We are not building a monument to a man's ego anymore, I told them. We are building homes, we are building communities, and this time, we put our names on our own work. We called the new firm Phoenix Architecture. It was a cliché, perhaps, but it fit. We were rising from the ashes of a disaster, stronger and purer than before. The atmosphere in the office was different. There was laughter, there was music, there was respect, and for the first time in 5 years, I loved coming to work. One of the first things I did as the owner of Phoenix was to settle the affairs of my past life. The penthouse on 57th Street, the glass tower where I had spent so many lonely nights waiting for a husband who was with someone else, was sold. It went to a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley for $22 million. I did not keep a penny of it. I took the entire sum and established the Fairmont Grant for Aspiring Architects. It was a full-ride scholarship fund for students from underprivileged backgrounds, kids who had the vision but not the wallet. It was my way of ensuring that the next Arthur Sterling would not have to lie and cheat to get a foot in the door. Or perhaps, to ensure that the next Lydia would have the resources to stand on her own 2 feet from the start. I did not move back into the Vanguard Tower with my mother, Evelyn offered. Of course, she had prepared a suite for me, complete with a private staff, but I declined. I need my own ground. Mother, I had told her, I bought a small, chaotic house in the suburbs of Westchester. It was a 1920s cottage with ivy growing on the walls, a creaky front porch, and a wild, untamed garden that smelled of lavender and damp earth. It was not impressive. It was not a power move. It was a home. Barnaby, my golden retriever, loved it. He spent his days chasing squirrels in the yard and his nights sleeping by the fireplace, finally free of the marble floors that used to hurt his hips. My relationship with my mother had changed, too. We were no longer the disappointed general and the rebellious soldier. We met for brunch every Sunday. We talked about business. Yes, but we also talked about books, about art, about life. She respected me now. I had walked through the fire and come out with steel in my spine. And that was the only language Evelyn Fairmont truly understood. We would never be warm and fuzzy. That simply was not in our DNA, but we were allies. We were family. One afternoon, while walking Barnaby in Central Park, I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench. feeding pigeons. It was Henry, the former doorman of my old building, the man Arthur had forced to kick me out into the rain. He looked older, his shoulders hunched in a worn coat. I walked up to him. "Henry?" He looked up, squinting against the sun. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by a look of fear. He started to stand up. "Mrs. Sterling, I mean, Ms. Fairmont, I am so sorry. I had to do it. I had a mortgage." "Sit down, Henry," I said gently, sitting beside him. Barnaby rested his head on Henry's knee, his tail wagging. "I know you did," I said. "I never blamed you. How are you?" "Unemployed," he sighed. "The management company fired the whole staff after the foreclosure. They said we were a security risk. I have been looking, but at my age—" "I need a head of security," I said, cutting him off. "For my new firm in Brooklyn, the pay is 20% higher than what you were making, and you get weekends off." Henry stared at me, his eyes watering. "After what I did? I left you on the street. You did your job," I said. "And you were the only one in that building who ever looked at me like I was a human being. Loyalty is rare. Henry, I value it." He started Monday. He wears a suit with the Phoenix logo on the lapel, and he guards the front door like a lion. No one gets past Henry unless they belong there. Sitting on the porch of my little house in the evening, listening to the crickets, and sipping a glass of wine that cost $12 a bottle, I realized something profound. For months, I had been fueled by the need for revenge. I wanted to see Arthur burn. I wanted to see him suffer. But revenge is a fire that eventually consumes the arsonist if they are not careful. I had stepped out of the flames just in time. The satisfaction did not come from seeing Arthur in handcuffs. It came from the fact that I no longer thought about him. He was gone from my head. I had evicted him from my mind, just as effectively as the bank had evicted him from the penthouse. The best revenge was not cruelty. It was not destruction. It was this. It was the quiet peace of a Tuesday evening. It was the thrill of signing a contract for a library renovation that would actually help people. It was the feeling of buying my own groceries with money I had earned. It was living a life so full, so vibrant, and so authentic that the darkness of the past simply had no room to exist. I stood up and walked into the kitchen to refill my glass. The phone on the counter buzzed. It was a text from a man I had met at a gallery opening last week. He was a landscape architect, kind eyes, rough hands, a nice laugh. "Dinner tonight? There is a new Italian place in the village." I looked at the message. I thought about Arthur's desperate need for validation, his constant hunger for more, more, more. I smiled and put the phone down without replying immediately. I would answer him later, or maybe I would not. I didn't need a partner to complete me. I didn't need a savior. I walked out to the backyard and looked up at the stars. They were the same stars that had shone over the balcony the night I called my mother. But they looked different now. They looked brighter. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. I was 30 years old. I had a business to run. I had a dog to feed. I had a life to live. I used to be a character in Arthur Sterling's play. The silent wife, the prop, the background noise. But the curtain had fallen on that tragedy. I raised my glass to the moon. "Here is to the architect," I whispered to myself. "And this time, I am designing the blueprint. I used to be a discarded wife in a party. Now, I am the party that they are never invited to." Thank you so much for listening to this story. As a writer who has seen a century of human drama, I put my heart into Lydia's journey, and I hope you felt every moment of her rise. I am so curious to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like New York, or a quiet corner of the world like Lydia's new home? Please comment below with your location and your thoughts on Arthur's karma. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can bring more powerful stories to you. Your support means the world to us.